Hello, I'm Dr. Lisa Coleman, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Global Inclusion and Strategic Innovation here at NYU, and I use she and her pronouns. I hope that everyone is taking very good care. We are thrilled to welcome you to today's program entitled Transformation Talks, where we spotlight leaders to learn from their journeys and gain knowledge about how to be agents working toward transformational change across our organizations. In the Office of Global Inclusion, we engage global diversity and inclusion principles with an intersectional focus on nimbleness, inclusivity, resilience, transformation, growth mindsets, design thinking, and adaptivity in all of our work. Transformation Talks is part of NYU's Be Together initiative centered on innovating, acting, and transforming together. And today we have the distinct honor to welcome Dean Jack Knott. Dean Jack H. Knott serves as the Dean of the Steinhardt School of Culture, Education, and Human Development at NYU and holds the Gale and Ira Drukier Dean's Chair. Before joining NYU, he served as the Dean of the Sol Price School of Public Policy at the University of Southern California, where he held the C. Irwin and Ione L. Piper Chair in Public Policy and Management. Prior to USC, Dean Knott served as the professor and director of the Institute of Government and Public Affairs at the University of Illinois and of the Institute for Public Policy and Social Research at Michigan State University. He founded the MSU Survey Research Center and helped to establish the Michigan Political Leadership Program. Dean Knott was also a visiting faculty member at Warwick University in the UK and a fellow at the International Institute of Management in Berlin, Germany. Dean Knott has published 3 books, numerous peer-reviewed journal articles, and several policy reports. His areas of expertise include political institutions and public policy, political economy, and public management. He has served as the principal investigator on numerous research grants and has consulted with foundations and nonprofit organizations on program evaluation and public policy, including the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and the California Endowment. He currently serves on the editorial boards of 2 journals in comparative public management and policy. Among his awards, he is an elected fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration and is the past president of the Network of Schools of Public Policy Affairs and Administrations. In addition, he has served as a member of the Educational Advisory Panel for the U.S. Government Accountability Office, GAO, in Washington, D.C., and a member of the Endowment Board of the American Society for Public Administration and a member of the board for Price Philanthropies Foundation. Dean Knott received his PhD from the University of California, Berkeley, his MA from the Paul H. Neate School of Advanced International Studies at the Johns Hopkins University, and his undergraduate degree from Calvin University. It is an absolute pleasure to be with you today, Dean Knott, and we are thrilled that you're here with us at NYU.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me to participate in these leadership talks. And thank you for the kind introduction.
Absolutely. So I'll just kick it off with our first question. I like to begin, as I do with each of our guests that we are featuring as part of this transformative talk series. As an accomplished and respected leader and change agent, how do you define success, progress, or transformation within the context of public policy and administration work?
Really the most important thing for me in defining success is changing the narrative about the values and purpose of the organization. It's a lot about who are we and what is our mission. That's fundamental. There's a prominent organizational sociologist named Philip Selznick, and he makes a distinction between institutional leadership and management. And the former he describes as defining the mission, the purpose, and the meaning of an organization, including its values. not just efficient or effective management of programs and people. So it's more about the why and less about the how. So while good management, in my view, is extremely important, obviously, institutional transformative leadership shapes the organization's vision and purpose, its strategic decision-making, and its inclusive and equitable culture. And achieving those is integral to how I define success.
Thank you so much. And we focus a lot on narratives in our work in the Office of Global Inclusion, and of course, the why, not just the how. So, and thank you for making that distinction between management and the vision and leadership. And our second question, in our office, we work across the university's campuses, disciplines, and fields. And so as you think about supporting the development of global leaders, and we know you do a lot of that work in Steinhardt and of course throughout your career, global leaders in public affairs, administration, and policy, what are some of the core strengths and skills that enable leaders to grow and remain nimble and in realizing change, particularly as they think about advancing the principles of global inclusion and strategy?
Yes, so fundamental for me is a key strength is a personal commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. It really needs to be part of the core belief of the leader. It can't be something made up or just for show. It needs to be really the core belief of the leader. Second, the leader needs to rely on data and evidence for decision making, but the leader must also have good listening skills to be able to learn from the actual lived experiences of others that might really not be captured in the data. And I find the combination of that really, really important in making change and being a leader. In addition, the leader should know how to bring people together in creative ways to produce innovative approaches and to build consensus through broad participation. That's really key, especially in a university. I think that's critical. I would add that the leader needs to work hard to earn trust from everyone. The leader works with from all backgrounds and beliefs. Being held accountable as a leader with integrity is essential to achieving this goal of building trust. The leader must also be prepared to unlearn what we thought to be correct and reach toward a better understanding and towards growth. That's really essential also. Leaders must be responsible for future leadership by identifying, nurturing, and developing the future leaders in the organization. And then finally, I might add that being grateful to for colleagues and students and thanking them for the amazing work they do is really an important part of being a good leader. So those are some of the traits that are very important to me in leadership.
Well, that is a wonderful list. I mean, everything from learning and listening and unlearning, right, to the data and evidence. And of course, this notion of trust, and trust is so important in how we build trust. So thank you for talking about that. Now I'd like to turn to talk a little bit about your leadership journey. So one of the things that I love about higher education is the transgenerational engagement, right, across generations and the collaboration that occurs. So just what you were talking about in terms of thinking about building consensus and how you go about that. And so a friend of mine asks, what would your 8-year-old self think of yourself today? And so given that we have an audience that consists of cross-generational group of emerging leaders, as you think about the arc of your career, what is something that you're most proud of, right? What's something that your 8-year-old self would just think, wow?
Yeah, my 8-year-old self was pretty naive about most of all of this, but imagining me. But in my case, I'm not sure it's one thing, but a set of interrelated things, and I'd like to explain that. One is respect for others, no matter their status in the organization, everyone has different talents, a personal life with family outside of work, and each person makes an important contribution. And one of my favorite stories was given by Max Dupree in his book, Leadership is an Art. And he tells a tale about his father, the founder of the company, attending the funeral of one of his employees who served as the millwright. This was some years ago, and if you don't know what a millwright is, it's a person who oversees the boiler. And a beautiful poem was read at the funeral ceremony. And Max's father asked, well, who wrote this beautiful poem? And the answer was the millwright. And so that lesson about the value and worth leads to really a concept of respect for persons of all different backgrounds and different levels in the organization. And I try to be open and honest and collaborative. And it's most important that people trust one another, have respect, and value each other. And that's one of the key things that I'm proud of as a leader. And I couldn't also help but adding that I'm proud of, over time, my entrepreneurship in helping create new and innovative programs that have really offered students wonderful new learning opportunities, as well as fostered research and outreach that has had an impact on communities, neighborhoods, and society. And so it's the combination of those two things that I would want to talk to my 8-year-old self about.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for talking with us about respect and, of course, leadership art. And that story, really, really, really important. And it's funny, you anticipated my next question by talking about entrepreneurship, because we're going to talk next about a little bit about innovation. So as you know, lots of research demonstrates this and underscores this idea that you cannot have innovation without, right, diversity and thinking about inclusion and access and thinking about how you build teams. And so as your dean, as the dean at NYU of the School of Culture, Education, and Human Development, what role has innovation played at your work? And you just talked a little bit about it, and there's that intersection between, right, innovation and entrepreneurship, and maybe you'll tease that out a little bit more. And tell us a little bit, as you think about readiness, right? We know that things are shifting all the time.
What?
So, readiness. So as you think about readiness for the future, right? And think about how you're thinking about planning and readiness for future disruptions, because everybody's talking about disruptions. Tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about that in relation to innovation as well.
Yeah, I'm going to, as you indicate, focus on innovation relative to equity and access and belonging. And I should start out by saying one of the 5 strategic goals that I've set out for the Steinhardt School is innovation. That's the third one, actually. And it's important for at least a few reasons. One is that we are living in a society that keeps evolving and changing, both in social and race relations, technology, in the economy, and also in governance and politics. The pandemic, for example, has revealed really glaring, already existing inequalities in healthcare and other aspects of our society. The tremendous progress made in electing a Black president of the United States triggered this really disturbing racist backlash. The continued racism in policing and other institutions became glaringly and shockingly displayed for the broader society. A lot of people already knew and lived it, but it became much more apparent in the broader society. And so in response, we really need to innovate by changing, as I indicated at the beginning, the narrative of who we are as an institution, and especially the racist, discriminatory aspects of who we are, and those things that are often embedded and not seen by everybody. And we need to innovate and make transformative changes if we're going to respond and be engaged and be a positive change agent, both at the school, at the university, and also in society. So the first point is about we live in this very changing environment and you need to innovate. The second is related in that organizations and people, they just get stuck in their ways of thinking and behaving. They not only they in part get stuck because they get invested in a way of thinking. And it's a cost to them and they don't want to give it up. And so they cling to things that become even apparently untrue or incorrect. And so we need to really work at changing our recruiting practices for students and employees through new pipelines and broader searches. And we need to rethink the possibly racist admissions and hiring standards and so on. We won't achieve our mission without that. Recruiting more women and diverse students and employees is also great, but if we don't then innovate in our organization's culture and its behavior and attitudes, they won't succeed and we won't succeed. And won't have a strong sense of belonging and well-being and accomplishment. And then a third reason is that diversity and inclusion itself creates innovation. The mix of people's backgrounds, their lived experiences, their expertise, and the interaction leads to creative thinking and new ways of approaching issues and opening opportunities. So for all these reasons, I really feel innovation had to be one of our strategic goals, had to be central to what we do.
Thank you so much, Jack. Thank you for that very comprehensive answer. And thank you also for, I think, pointing out the very real points about recruitment and then retention and culture, because I think those two things sometimes we can recruit, but if we don't set up our cultures and change the narratives, then you're exactly right. We won't be successful. So thank you again. So I can't believe we're coming to the end of the questions, but so I have one final question. And given your leadership journey, as we talked about earlier, global leaders and sort of thinking about new leaders, could you share a piece of advice you wish you had been given, or something that sustains you, or even it gives you joy, or something wish you had known earlier, right? These kinds of things, because being a leader, and we know leadership is tough. It's not always easy. And so if you could talk to the emerging leaders about some of the things that you actually wish you had known, or things you do to support yourself now, that would be terrific.
Well, what I think I'll focus on is what I consider a fortunate piece of advice that I received earlier in my career that has helped sustain me in various leadership roles over time. And this advice was actually given to me when I was an assistant professor. And I was an interdisciplinary applied scholar in a very discipline-specific department that didn't seem to appreciate or value all that much the work I was doing. And so I contacted my graduate school senior professor and mentor. And I told him, I was really worried about succeeding, and I was very worried about being able to get tenure in this department. And he responded, look, keep doing the outstanding work that you do and do what is right. Over time, it will be recognized, and don't worry too much about what they think about you. So I did follow his advice. I was promoted actually and granted tenure early, which gave me the self-confidence to take risks, including accepting the leadership of an interdisciplinary research center that you mentioned earlier, that led me on the path to this broader leadership role that I play today. And there is real joy in knowing you are doing an excellent job and in what you believe in and making a difference. Now, our goal at NYU Steinhardt is to make sure that my experience is one that all faculty, staff, administrators, and students can realize, that they are recognized for their excellent work and for doing the right thing, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, or other group or individual characteristics. We want everyone to succeed and believe in themselves. So that's a little bit of advice.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for talking about, right, taking risks. I think, right, taking strategic and calculated risks and doing the right thing. And for so many of us, I think that has led us down certainly sometimes circuitous leadership paths, but nonetheless, the story of promotion, et cetera, and early tenure also brings great rewards often. So thank you, Dean Knott. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your story and for sharing those important leadership nuggets about how we can be better leaders and what it looks like in terms of thinking about transformation for our organizations and the hard work of that.
Well, thank you very much, Lisa. It was my pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate all the great work you do for NYU and all of us. So,
thank you so much. Thank you. We hope that you will follow the Office of Global Inclusion for more transformation talks, as well as updates, events, programs, and resources, and that you will partner with us in our efforts to advance institutional excellence. Thanks again for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing you at additional events and programs.